In ancient times, there was a monk named Megihya. So Megihya was at one point in time the attendant monk to the Buddha. And one day in India, he's walking and he sees a beautiful mango grove. And the thought arises in him, it is enough for a young practitioner to exert himself in meditation. Let me go ask the Buddha for permission to go meditate in that mango grove. So, in other words, he has this thought, like basically, all I really need to do on the path to peace is to exert myself in meditation. So he goes to the Buddha and he asks for his permission to go, for his leave, essentially, to go meditate. And the Buddha says, "Wait until I am not alone, then you can go," right? Because the Buddha is basically saying, "I should have an attendant with me, so wait until someone else comes, and then you can go." And Megya says something to the effect of, "Well, you've already done the work, you know, you've attained Nibbana or Nirvana, enlightenment, awakening, but I have not. So let me go." And again, the Buddha says no. And then Megya asks a third time. And as you may know in the suttas, when you ask the Buddha three times, he's not going to say no three times. So he allows Megya to go. And long story short, Megya goes to the mango grove. He sits, he tries to meditate, and he has a terrible go at it. All kinds of discursive thoughts, distractions arise in his mind, and he has a terrible meditation, and he's not expecting it. He's kind of like, "Wow, this meditation isn't working." So he goes to the Buddha and explains what has happened, and the Buddha says, uh, "In one whose awareness release is not yet mature, there are five things that'll bring it to maturation." So, in other words, in one whose mind, in whose awareness has not reached the end goal of Nibbana, awakening, there are five things that'll mature that person's awareness, that person's mind, and bring them towards the goal. So the first is what's called the Kalyana Mitta, which roughly translates to wise, admirable, beautiful friend. So the first factor is association, being close to a Kalyana Mitta, a wise and admirable friend. And by the way, the Buddha's standard for this is very high. It's quite rare to have a true Kalyana Mitta, someone who's on the path to peace, someone who just by being around them, you're sort of happier. Their energy helps you. You're inspired to practice. Okay. So that's number one. The second factor is one is virtuous. So this is what's called sila in Pali, Sila. It's translated as virtue. Goodness is another word. And, goodness, virtue, sila, this is a really important part of the path. This has to do with how we behave. It's learning to conduct oneself in such a way that we don't harm other living beings. And in doing so, we lose regret, remorse. We gain a confidence. Even if someone criticizes us or insults us, if we know that our actions are in line with sila, with virtue, we have this great wellness, this wellspring of well-being, confidence, non-remorse can arise in one who practices with virtue. Okay, so that's the second factor. The third factor he talks about is, uh, again, this is the third factor that brings maturity in one's awareness, in one's spirituality. And this is that one can hear, uh, basically talk of Dhamma at ease, at will. So it's easy for one to hear Dhamma talks, talk that is sobering, that is conducive to restraint, to concentration, to samadhi, right? Which is a very interesting piece, I think. Basically, you want to live in such a way that it's not hard for you, it's not infrequent for you to hear the Dhamma or the Dharma. So that's number three. The fourth factor is that one arouses persistence, energy, effort. So this is basically right effort. So it's effort in abandoning what is unskillful, what is unhelpful. So thoughts, moods, feelings, actions, speech, phenomena, anything that is unskillful that leads to you uh, becoming less satisfied, less well. And also, this includes the energy, the persistence to develop what is skillful, such as factors on the path to peace, such as the Noble Eightfold Path, those eight factors, the seven factors of awakening, the 37 factors of enlightenment. So there's all this goodness, skillful activity, skillful habits, skillful ways of looking, modes of perception that we are meant to develop. So that's the fourth factor. Again, that's right effort. And then the last of the five is discernment or what's also called wisdom. Okay. And wisdom is it's not really the how most Americans or English speaking people would use that word wisdom. When the Buddha uses the word wisdom, it's at a much higher standard. It's about insight that brings freedom from suffering. Okay. So these are the five. And then the Buddha says something very, very interesting, which is really, for me, the meat of this sutta. He says, and just to recap here, okay, the five sort of factors that bring maturity in one who is not yet fully mature on the spiritual path are number one, the Kalyana Mitta, so association with the wise. Number two, virtue. Number three, one gets to hear at ease, at will, frequently Dhamma talks. Okay. The fourth is right effort, effort to abandon what is unskillful and to develop what is skillful. And the fifth is wisdom. Okay. And then the Buddha says, for one who has association with the wise. And let me see if I can find the exact wording here. Yes, so he says the Buddha says, Megihya, when a monk has admirable people as friends, companions, and colleagues, it is to be expected that he will be virtuous. Okay? And again, when a monk has admirable people as friends, colleagues, it is expected that he will get to hear at will, easily, and without difficulty, talk that is truly sobering and conducive to the opening of awareness. So, in other words, talk on Dhamma. And again, when one has admirable people as friends, colleagues, companions, it is to be expected that his persistence will be aroused for the abandoning of unskillful qualities and for the developing of skillful qualities. And then lastly, when one has admirable people as companions, friends, colleagues, it is expected that they will develop discernment, wisdom. Okay? So can you see how important it is to associate with the wise? To be with the Kalyana Mitta, to find people like that, and then to really spend time around them. There is another sutta called the Upaddha Sutta, which is very, very famous. You may have heard it, where Ananda, who's the Buddha's cousin, and at that point, Ananda is the attendant to the Buddha, right? So in the first sutta, in Megihya Sutta, Megihya is the attendant, but later Ananda becomes the attendant, and Ananda is really like the famous attendant of the Buddha. So anyway, in any case, in that sutta, Ananda goes to the Buddha and he says, I think that the Kalyana Mitta, associating with the wise, beautiful, admirable friend, is half of the holy life. So it's a pretty cool statement, where it seems like Ananda, he's just kind of realizing how important it is to 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 have this quality, this factor on the path of the Kalyana Mitta, the wise and admirable friend. And he says, I think it's actually half of the holy life. He kind of exclaims this to the Buddha. And the Buddha says, don't say that, Ananda. It is the whole of the path. Association with the Kalyana Mitta, the wise and admirable friend, is the whole of the path. Wow. And actually later in that sutta, the Buddha actually says it is on dependence on me, or due to dependence on me, that the beings of the world gain freedom, gain liberation, gain Nibbana, awakening, enlightenment. Um, so the Buddha is really saying something that you don't hear all the time in Theravada Buddhism, because there's a huge emphasis in Theravada on sort of like self-reliance. And the Buddha talks about this many times about how no one can do this for you. You have to practice. And through that practice, you gain awakening. Um, but it's very interesting that he kind of calls this out, and that you need to hear these teachings in some form. Um, and part of this is sort of cosmologically what a Buddha is from a Theravada perspective is a Buddha is the first being in an entire world system to break through to awakening. He sort of rediscovers the Dhamma, the natural law on the way things are. And he comes to this great awakening that things are fabricated. The world is fabricated, dependent on ways of looking, empty of any inherent existence. He awakens to what's called dependent arising, dependent co-arising, paticcu samuppada in Pali, and he gains liberation. And that is considered to be this incredible feat because no one's there to teach him. He has to figure this out on his own. It's an incredibly difficult, subtle, refined, deep awakening insight that a Buddha gains. And then he teaches. If we're lucky to be in a world system where a Buddha decides to teach, he spreads that energy that he turns the Dharma wheel, as it's called. So you can't overstate the importance of such a being and how lucky we are. Um, and yeah, I mentioned this for a number of reasons, but really think about what you consume, who you're listening to, who you surround yourself with. And nowadays with the internet, with YouTube, we're really lucky. We can, now it's easier than ever to be able to access the Dhamma. And if you just keep doing that, if you bring that into your life, just watch what happens. It is to be expected that you will mature spiritually, you know? And in particular, when you find a Kalyana Mitta, a true person, um, go see them in person. Uh, Bhante Dhammajiva Mahathero, this wonderful Sri Lankan monk, is visiting where I live soon. And I'm currently encouraging, all my friends to go see him in part because of this sutta, the Megihya Sutta. It's really, it's probably the best thing you can do. If you're seeking peace, if you're interested in being happy, is to put yourself around the people who have already found true, genuine happiness. So with that, we'll close. Whatever living beings there may be, may they share in the blessings springing from this teaching. By the power of these merits, may all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami.